You're getting 9 p.m. Gabbie tonight.
Okay.
Usually they get
special?
like noon Gabbie.
Oh my God. Okay.
No, just like less obnoxious.
Oh, now you guys know the backstory. Welcome to another Ask Dr. Mike episode. I have the lovely Gabbie Hanna with me today. She does amazing work on her channel, talking about all sorts of experiences, trying some dieting stuff, doing lifestyle videos.
Yes.
You even have a music video that was like crushing the charts this year.
Yeah, that was cool.
That was awesome.
And a new one coming up.
Ooh. What's that one called? Or
Monster.
Baby, I'm the monster.
Yeah, it's actually a super mental, healthy song.
I love that you're talking about mental health. What inspired you to do that, by the way? Like, I'm curious.
I just suffered with a lot of mental health issues, and I've always been really open about it with my followers. And
I'm sure
I found that it was like,
for that.
I hope so. But I actually found that once I started talking about it, because I tried to hide it for so long, that's when I started healing. And now I'm in such a like healthy, happy, genuinely good place. And it wasn't until I started talking about it and just kind of ripped myself open and gave it to the world that
What was
I
the response
healed.
like from the community?
It was great. I mean, first of all, the YouTube community who started talking to me about it was like, thank you so much for talking about this. I've never been able to, but you put it into words. And then obviously there's so many people out there that relate to like anxiety and depression and eating disorders. And then they were seeing somebody who they kind of looked up to suffer with the same stuff. And I don't know, I'm hoping that it's starting a dialogue a little bit with it, because
I think
people don't talk about it enough.
I mean, I just watched your recent video on sort of the psychology behind social media stars.
Yeah.
And I related to that a lot, because when I first started doing Instagram like 5 years ago, I was a huge narcissist, and I didn't grow up being a narcissist. It made me that for that time period, because I would go around showing people how many followers I had, how many likes I got, just like everything you talked about. It starts becoming an addictive process. And
well,
just
narcissists aren't born, they're made.
Okay, I mean, that's yes.
For the most part.
There's definitely a genetic component. There's definitely a nature component.
There's
so
always
your
like a predisposition, but for the most part, I was actually watching a psychologist talk about this, where narcissism is one of like the very few mental disorders where it's almost entirely how you were raised, as opposed to being born. And that's the difference between psychopathy and sociopathy too, is one is born and one is raised.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, look,
weird.
I've seen it debated both ways, and
Yeah.
I think there's definitely room for nature versus nurture discussion.
Yeah, you're the doctor. I'm not going to debate you on it at all.
No, it's not about debating it. I don't claim to be an expert at it. I'm looking at things from the clinical side. I do some research on my own, but I have a lot of experience in treating people who have some mental health issues, obviously physical health issues, because that's part of what I do. And a big thing that I've noticed is there's been a huge uptick in anxiety symptoms, depressive symptoms.
Yeah.
And in making some of the YouTube videos that people are making on the subject, I get a little upset.
Really?
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. Like the difference between, let's say, a narcissistic personality trait versus a narcissistic personality disorder.
Oh, please, go off, Dr. Mike. This is so important. I already know what you're going to say. Please go off.
Well, no. Like, they sound incredibly similar, and when you're talking in common tongue, you're just saying narcissist, right? You're not defining them.
Yes.
But in reality, there's a small but very important difference between the two. So you can have a narcissistic personality trait and be totally fine.
Which almost everybody does.
And have success and this and that, to a degree. Everyone has it to some sort of degree, I guess you can say. But then if you have a disorder, that means it's gotten so bad that it's affecting major aspects of your life functions.
Right.
We're talking about work, your ability to sustain a job, sustain a relationship, achieve happiness in your life and well-being, creating a lot of anxiety, depression, that sort of thing. So there's people that are raging narcissists and exhibit narcissistic personality traits who are very successful and don't have the disorder.
Right.
But when I watch some of these videos, everyone's very quick to throw out these terms because they're using them in plain English. But from a medical side, it's a little inaccurate and a little bit disingenuous, because people are getting labeled too soon. The idea of mental health and the whole concept of mental health is so complicated and confounded. Even when you're talking about sociopaths, right? That was a big subject on your video.
Yeah.
So sociopaths. In medicine, we don't even have the term sociopath. We have antisocial personality disorder, right? You studied that.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about labeling people sociopaths, we need to be very careful, because if someone is under the influence of drugs, let's say, whatever they're taking, they could be abusing Adderall, or they could be using cocaine or marijuana or alcohol, and they're acting a certain way because they're under the influence of drugs, you can't really call them sociopaths or having antisocial personality disorder, because are they just doing that because they're under the influence? So they could be showing sociopathic tendencies and not be a sociopath. And
For
again,
sure.
very small difference, but very important.
Right.
Because it's very easy to get labeled something and have that label stuck with you incorrectly your entire life. And
I think it's also
unfairly.
important to not try to diagnose people, A, if you're not a doctor,
Yep.
and B, if you've never met that person. Like, you can't look at somebody's YouTube videos and say
absolutely.
what they are and what
Please,
they're
yes.
not.
We need
It's
to
so
highlight
dangerous.
that. So it's not even about, you can't, even by meeting somebody, you
Yeah.
can't, like I need multiple visits to get down to the bottom of what's bothering somebody
Yeah.
or why they're having some
Because
difficulties
people act
in their
differently in
life.
also like different social situations.
Yes.
Where if you're like a young kid who wants to get attention and feel big, you might go to school and act a certain way, but at home you're actually a really compassionate,
Yeah.
loving person.
Yeah, so think about a person who suffers from bipolar disorder, for
Right.
example, and then to sort of self-medicate, they use all sorts of substances.
Right.
This is a hypothetical example. Now that person, because they're having extreme mania at times, which they're very hyper, and they're also using drugs at that point, they can exhibit all sorts of tendencies, narcissistic tendencies, sociopath tendencies, but they're not any of those things.
Yeah.
They're actually suffering from bipolar disorder and substance abuse disorder, which are two different things, but in order to get there, imagine a person doesn't come in, they say, I have bipolar disorder.
And I drink every day.
Right? That's
Right.
not it. You have to get that person's trust.
Yeah.
You have to hear them out and hear what their thought process is like, where they're having difficulties in life, how they view certain situations.
And their family history and how they grew up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I incredibly dislike when people start diagnosing people just either from their YouTube channel or from meeting them once or twice, because it's just inaccurate.
Yeah.
There's going to be faults and you're going to unfairly judge people.
But even if it is accurate,
Yeah, like what use are you doing unless you're doing some proper education? So
Yeah.
That's my thoughts on it. I just think that people need to tread carefully in this territory because labeling people, I know people get very wound up when I say labeling, right? They're like, oh, I don't want to be labeled that I have bipolar disorder. Look, you have a diagnosis.
A diagnosis,
It doesn't
yeah.
mean that anything is quote unquote bad about you. It just means that you have something going on that we can help
But that's
fix.
also why we need to talk about mental illness more because obviously everybody knows about the stigma around mental illness where it's like embarrassing to be told
Sure.
you're borderline personality or have bipolar
course,
or something
very
that's
difficult.
just a treatable illness that you need help with and people are so ashamed and I just think that's so sad.
It's sad. It's a very difficult situation.
And it's dangerous because it
emotions-
deters people too from getting help.
It deters people from getting health. It causes substance abuse disorders because they're
Yeah.
trying to self-medicate without exposing themselves to others. So the more open we can be about it and honest in these conversations, that's why I don't like labeling people too early. Have the conversation with your doctor
Right.
first and then figure out where it goes. But then something I'll also say against the medical community, against my folks, is that we often jump to a diagnosis too soon, both mentally and physically. The mind can really be divided into two sort of areas. You have the
Right.
conscious and unconscious mind. Conscious is everything you're thinking about now, whether or not you want to pick this cup up, that's in your conscious.
Right.
And then your subconscious is everything that your baggage from childhood, what are you upset about from an inferiority complex, worries about being perfect in your life, wanting to achieve the best result possible so that you can prove someone wrong. Like, you're not actively thinking about those things, but they
Right.
exist in your mind. When you have very powerful emotions that start stacking up in your unconscious that you refuse to acknowledge, if you consistently repress them, which your mind wants to do. Why? Because if they come out, you're going to break down. You're going to start crying. You won't be able to work. You may even hurt yourself. So to protect you, your mind does a few interesting things. And one of those things is it gives you symptoms. Symptoms like anxiety. If you think about what anxiety is, let's take social anxiety. It's a fear of something that's not actually life-threatening, right? Like if you go hang out with friends, no one's going to kill you. I mean, unless there's a crazy circumstance, but generally no one's going to kill
Where'd
you.
you grow up? Because my town.
Brooklyn, yeah, I don't know, so maybe. But in general, no one's there to harm you with your
Yeah.
friends. But people that have social anxiety create an anxiety. Their mind creates this anxiety. And it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them. Their mind is protecting them by causing them to worry about that social anxiety instead of their repressed emotions. Because
Yeah.
those seem to be so dangerous that let's have them worry about something not so dangerous instead. But it also does the same thing from a physical aspect. Let's have this person have a muscle spasm and have some back pain right now.
Oh, wow.
And they'll be thinking about their back pain, how to treat it, what doctor to see, they'll complain about it, and
Yeah.
they won't be thinking about their repressed emotions. So what I started doing
You
in
think
my
your repressed
practice-
emotions cause muscle spasms?
Yeah, absolutely.
Whoa.
Not just muscle spasm. There's been research done on this that some of these repressed emotions can go into the form of acid reflux, chronic cough, So many unique things.
These are all my issues.
Allergies, rashes.
I feel like I'm reading WebMD right now.
No, again, I'm not saying that repressed emotions are the source of all your problems.
No, I get it.
What
Yeah.
I'm saying is, because this started off by me saying how the medical community is at fault a little bit.
Right.
And what I was saying is that the medical community is at fault because we're often quick to just say there has to be some kind of cellular process that's going on that's wrong, or there has to be some sort of muscle spasm or broken bone or an impinged nerve, some
But it's
kind
really
of issue.
coming from like your mind.
Yeah, so what I do with my patients is, first of all, I rule out a physical cause. That's the first thing that I do. And a medical cause, obviously, like if you have something wrong with your thyroid, that can cause some issues with your muscles and all these things.
Right.
So everything medically and physically, I try and rule out first, the most dangerous things first, and then move down the line. Once I realize everything's fine and we try some conservative therapies like physical therapy, some home exercise programs, stretching, icing, that sort of thing for physical pain. And then it doesn't work, or the pain fluctuates, and I see that it has a very unique history to it where the person keeps getting these aches and pains. I bring them in and I just have a conversation with them. And it's a simple conversation about like, what's going on in your life, what was childhood like. It's not very in detail initially.
Right.
And what people do and what they've learned to do is they repress their emotions incredibly in ways that will surprise you. For example, I'll ask a person, I think this will be actually fun right now.
Okay.
I'm gonna do this with you on camera, but I hope you're ready for this.
Are we about to
So-
go into a therapy session?
No, we're not gonna do a therapy session. But if I were to ask you about your childhood, right,
Okay.
and you'd bring up a painful memory of childhood, the appropriate response is if it hurt you and you were upset by it, would be to cry, right? But your brain doesn't want you to cry because you're on camera, there's a person here that you don't really have a familiarity with.
Yeah.
So what your brain does is it encourages you to smile. How often have you heard people talk about a very painful thing that happened to them, but they smile while they do it?
That's like my MO for sure. Yeah.
So that is a form of repression. And me as a doctor, when I see this happen, all I have to do is ask the person, can I interrupt you for 1 second? Tell me right now, you're telling me a very painful story, why are you smiling? And people break down. They start crying, they understand that these emotions are very powerful and they've never appreciated them.
I start sobbing right now.
You look at people like folks like comedians who are very funny. They have a high amount of mental issues.
Oh, yeah,
When we're
they're
talking about
so dark.
anxiety,
Yeah.
depression, and all these things, because comedy is a great outlet for that. Same thing as
Yeah.
smiling. Another thing I hear people say is, I had probably a messed up childhood. They'll say words like that where they're sort of mitigating. They won't.
They don't want to like admit it fully.
Yeah, so they'll keep using these blocking words. And they'll say, probably was a bad childhood, or
Yeah.
drinking was probably hurting my marriage. And I'll have to stop them and I'll say, okay, honestly, right now, was drinking hurting your marriage? And they'll say, yeah, it was. I'm like, so stop saying probably when you're telling the story. And just having them connect to their emotions, becoming
Yeah.
mindful, helps a lot.
Yeah.
I've had patients completely cure their back pains, their elbow pains, their acid reflux symptoms just by connecting them to their internal thoughts and dialogue. Because life forces us to repress, and sometimes that repression is needed because, like, if you're in a job interview or something, you can't just start sobbing about something that happened in childhood.
Right.
So sometimes you need to repress. But at other times, we need that outlet. We need that ability. So what you're doing on camera, I've seen even videos of you crying, right? That exist.
So many. There's so
No, but
many.
that's powerful, right? And
I get a lot of hate
this.
for that. People get really mad at me for crying.
People shouldn't get mad. What I think is good for you, and you even mentioned it that now that you're happier and healthier as a
Yeah.
result, even though you cried,
Yeah.
is that you found an outlet for it.
Yeah.
And people find different outlets.
And honestly, I will say I've had my entire life chronic neck, back pain, so many chiropractors, so many massage therapists, like trying to figure out why my neck is always
Sure.
slipping and all that. And ever since I started getting myself in check, and of course some of it came out with like training and stuff,
Yep.
but I have so little back and neck pain now that I'm emotionally happy
Yeah.
and so open with my feelings.
And
I'm
nothing
not
changed,
embarrassed
right?
about
Nothing
crying.
changed
No.
physically, right?
No, nothing
It's
at
not like you
all.
had a surgery that fixed your
No,
problem.
I mean, like, obviously, like working out would like strengthen your muscles and hopefully keep some
Look,
things
that
in
helps,
place.
but that's not.
It's so mental.
Yeah. It's mental, and what I notice a lot is a lot of these treatments that we do, like physical therapy, acupuncture, injections, surgeries even, some of them work. They work on fixing the symptoms temporarily, and then something
Yeah.
new pops up. So first your neck hurt, you got an injection, now your elbow hurts. Then your elbow
What
gets an
injections
injection.
are you talking about?
Well, like steroid injections. So like
They do that?
like anti-inflammatory injections.
Yeah, I never had one, so I never knew that.
Like people get them
Yeah.
into their knees for osteoarthritis.
Am I on your foot right now? Oh no.
No.
I thought I was just like
All
on
good.
your foot this whole time. Okay, anyways, go ahead.
So like knee injections, whatever. So
Yeah.
people get a lot of treatments, and our medical community facilitates this because it's easy. Because if I have 15 minutes with a patient, I can't go and start talking about their childhood, but I can say, oh, well, you have arthritis, that's why your knee hurts.
Yeah.
But why did it hurt more today when you had a stressful incident with your family than
Yeah.
it did yesterday?
Right.
You know, so we have to be aware of this mental component, and because of our time limitations, we often don't. Because of our research funding not being put towards mental health, we don't. So I've become more and more a proponent of this. I'm an osteopathic physician. I'm a DO, not an MD. I had a sports medicine focus initially when I started treating my patients. I saw so many patients with back pain, and I felt like I wasn't helping a lot of them. And now that I started using this approach, and I'm not doing anything revolutionary, I really just started having honest conversations with them to connect them to their thoughts, to have them understand that they may be repressing a lot, and just by opening that up, opening those floodgates,
Right.
they feel a lot better. And so far, it's such a low risk option. The only risk is I spend some time. That's it. That's really it. That I spend extra time with that patient, and that could probably have benefits on its own.
I actually saw a quote one time, I think it was on Bates Motel of all things, but she was talking to a therapist and he said, well, why do you hold that in? And she said, or why don't people talk about their feelings? And she said, because then people would walk around crying all the time. And he was like, well, what's wrong with that?
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Repressing.
And obviously there's
is
a
important.
time and a place, but it's interesting that people are so embarrassed to like talk about like a painful childhood
Yeah.
because people don't want to admit that they didn't have some type of picture perfect life.
Look, I've seen it from all angles. Being a doctor,
Yeah.
I've seen people who are so eager to share that story with anybody where it's inappropriate. Like
Yeah.
they'll come up to my front desk person and start sharing their childhood. It's like, well, we gotta
That's
know some
also-
boundaries.
There's probably something there too.
Well, that's
going
what I'm
on.
saying.
Yeah.
So it comes from all different sides. But there's extremes on either end, and I try and figure out what the most balanced approach is. And there's a doctor who just passed away recently. His name is Dr. Sarno. I read his book. It's called The Divided Mind. A lot of my initial thoughts came from reading his book. And he gave a very funny example that I think you'll appreciate. He was on a cruise ship with his wife traveling.
Okay.
And he was having some symptoms of acid reflux, like he was having an upset stomach. And he never got that. He knew he didn't have an ulcer or any of these things, so he started looking internally. What's causing me to have these symptoms? He couldn't figure it out, but when he got home, all the symptoms resolved. Like no more acid reflux completely. And he thought about it and he realized there's like inner child in all of us called the id. Probably Freud
Yeah.
when you studied psychology. And this child wants all the narcissist stuff. It wants pleasure all the time. It wants all the attention on them. It wants all the likes. It wants all the comments. That's it. It doesn't want to do anything for anybody. But then we have this other part of our minds called the ego, which keeps that in check and says, well, no, you can't just have everything for you. You have to help out others. You have to do these things. Then there's the superego and he gets past that, but let's just focus on the id. He realized his id didn't want to be on that trip. He doesn't like traveling, but he knew his wife did. So he was there for his wife, and he was doing that because he wants to be in a healthy and loving relationship. And he was having acid reflux as a result. And then he thought, if I came to this conclusion and then started having this emotion that I would get mad at my wife, maybe it's worth trading some upset stomach to not be mad at my wife.
Right.
So sometimes repression actually works.
Yeah.
But my job is to allow you to have control over it. So that sometimes you want to repress in a given situation, like you're on a trip with your significant other, great. But on other times where you need to have an outlet, you know how to connect to that side of things. And that's what...
If you can cry on YouTube and then get views
Look,
for it and then be encouraged.
that's a way that you chose to make it yourself.
Yeah.
And we're all not perfect. We're all learning. My knowledge of medicine is limited. Everyone's knowledge of medicine is limited. Like we don't have a total cure for foot fungus, like toenail fungus. Isn't that crazy? Like you would think like, oh, we've cured so much. We can't even cure toenail fungus.
Wow.
So like when I look at some experts.
Do a lot of people have toenail fungus?
Yeah, especially as they get older and our immune systems.
Oh, I
weaken a
can't
little
wait.
bit. It's going to be there for you in the future. So
Can't
be
wait.
careful with nail salons. Only go to ones you trust.
I never get pedicures.
Okay. Well,
Just-
you can get
just
it on your
manicures.
hands too. So be careful.
Oh, great.
But that's my biggest thing. Why I have my YouTube channel is because I try and encourage people to understand that anyone who's overly confident, overly promising that they have all the answers, oh my God, this is so good. We're going to be like spilling tea right now. I can't believe we're going to be spilling tea. Did you hear about those YouTubers? I don't even know their names that claimed they were dying recently.
No.
Yeah. There's some gaming guys, and I saw briefly, they said that they were dying, And then someone called them out on it because
Wait, you don't know who they were?
they have a
Are they
pretty
big?
successful channel, like 4 million subs. And they had these 4 million subs. They said they were dying. It was unclear what they were dying from, but they said that they saw a doctor who
There were two of them?
Two of them.
Both
yeah,
of them are dying.
at the same time. And they saw a chiropractor who they said cured them from dying. And someone called them out and made a response video to them, and there was drama about it. And then
Wait, they saw a chiropractor.
I know,
who cured
but
their
let's
death?
let's go in judgment-free zone
Okay,
for now.
judgment free.
Yeah. So they-
Wait, I'm sorry. Were they dying from like a
it was
tight
unknown
back?
at the time.
Like what is going on?
It was unknown at the time. And then someone called them out on it, and then they made a video saying that they were proving that they were dying.
Okay.
And they showed proof that one of them was taking a lot of medications for what looked like a kidney issue or some autoimmune issue where the immune system attacks itself. Back in the day, they showed
Okay.
like evidence of him taking those pills. It was very dramatic. I watched parts of it. But the thing that bothered me most about the video is not that they're talking about that they're dying and they're trying to get views or whatever it is that they're doing. Because one of them said that when he meant that he was dying, he was saying that he was having such bad anxiety and depression that he could have committed suicide. That's what he meant when he was dying, which is
Okay.
a stretch for me. And look, whatever
Okay.
anyone wants to put out about their own emotions, I support. That's their call. But what bothered me is they said that this doctor can cure anything. He has the answer to anything. That was a quote from their video. So them talking about them dying,
Wow.
I have no, whatever they want to do, go do it. I'm not going to even judge that because I don't know their medical
I will.
history. All you.
Okay.
But I don't know their medical history. I need more to decide
Am I
what
getting
that
myself
even
in trouble?
means.
Like, are these people going to come and be like,
No, because
"We
actually a lot of
love
people.
this person.
No, a lot of
Okay.
people don't like what they're doing because they also like give
Yeah.
away iPhones on those videos.
Oh,
Literally, they're like, we're dying, but we're giving away iPhones. So follow us and follow this
we're
doctor.
checking their social blade after this.
It's crazy. They lost a lot of followers after that. But whatever. So my biggest problem is that they said this doctor can cure anything. Be wary of doctors that say they can cure anything or overpromise things.
Yeah.
The smartest people in the world will be the first people to tell you that they don't know.
Yeah.
In fact, the more you study, the PhDs
Well, I don't know
of the world.
shit, so I must be a genius.
Well, the fact that you appreciate that you don't know a lot is a powerful start. Because as people study, and like you look at like high school, right? Like you know a little bit, then you go into college, you know more, and then PhD. In comparison to how much you know to what you think you know,
Right.
PhD drops drastically. Because as a PhD, you realize I have so many more questions than I have answers.
Right.
And even the answers that we have as PhDs and doctorates, we know that in the future, those answers are going to be proven wrong.
Right.
Like initially we thought one thing, and then we totally changed our minds
Medicine
about
changes
it.
so much,
Because
yeah.
we learn more about ourselves.
What would you say to people, because we're talking about like having an outlet and stuff.
Yep.
So I actually said something in a video once where I was like, I say like, don't let your pain go to waste, like do something creative with it.
Yep.
And somebody commented where they're just like, I'm just like not creative. Like I can't paint, I can't draw, I can't write. Like I'm not a creative artistic person.
Yeah.
So what should I do? And I was like, I guess I don't know. Like if you're not somebody who likes sports or art, like what do you do?
Well, I have a good answer for those people. First of all, I applaud you saying that to get people an outlet because what you're talking about is something I mention a lot. It's called PTG.
Okay.
You've heard of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD,
Yes.
right? Coming home from war, if you're a domestic abuse survivor, you know, you have PTSD, it's possible. But we hear a lot about that in the news, PTSD, but you never hear PTG. PTG is post-traumatic growth. It's a person who've gone through something horrible, some kind of trauma like war, like cancer, family member who had cancer, and they come out after this traumatic episode and they grow as a person. They become better. They find an outlet for their struggle.
Right.
Very similar to what you're talking about with yourself. Like you said, you were going through some mental issues, and from that, you learned and you became better, and you started educating people and educating yourself. That's PTG. You're an example of post-traumatic growth.
I've never heard that term.
It's not in literature. It's not something that you would find. I came up with it in my own mind, but I've also now saw other people mention it. They didn't steal it from me. I didn't steal it from them. It's a sort of a
Parallel
normal line of
thinking.
thinking, parallel
Yeah.
thinking. So PTG, it's something important. So giving them an outlet is smart because they can grow from it. With that being said, a lot of people will say, well, what can I do? I don't have a strength, right? That's something so common.
Right.
And my thing is, ask 5 people who know you best and ask them to write the number 1 quality that they think you have, whatever it is. And you can use that quality to achieve pretty much anything.
That's true,
And
yeah.
people say, well, no, doctor, because like people say I'm funny and I want to be a doctor. How is that going to help? And I pose them a very simple question. Who do you think in terms of patient population, like ages of patients, who do you think needs to laugh and enjoys laughing the most if you're going to be a doctor?
Kids.
Wrong. Any other guesses?
Adults.
Everybody.
Oh, word? Okay. Cool. I feel like when like a teacher will stump you in class.
Yeah.
And it's like that obvious answer and everybody gets really annoyed.
No, but
That's
it's
what just happened to
true.
me.
Everyone
No, it's
wants
true,
to laugh.
it's true.
And think about it, when you're
Yeah.
sick and you're going through a rough time, don't you want to laugh even more?
Yeah.
Because everyone, rightfully so, is being very serious and somber around you to not upset you. But then if someone comes in with a little bit of humor, it helps. It's a good pressure release valve. And I can always say that if you have some sort of strength that people find in you, I can find a way to make it fit your goals.
No, that's so true.
So it's really, we grew up in a society. When were you born?
91.
I was born in '89, so we're almost the same age. And we grew up in this time frame in the '90s where a lot of self-esteem was just pushed on us. Like parents were saying to us that we're all special.
We're the trophy generation.
We're
yeah.
amazing.
Participation
trophies. This is great. And what the problem with that is, it breeds a lot of narcissistic tendencies. Why? Because you'll go into a social setting with a group of people, and you may do something really wrong socially. Like you may start screaming when you shouldn't be screaming, or you'll make really obnoxious jokes that don't make sense for the moment.
Right.
And when people try and tell you, like socially, like, man, that was not right, or you should have done something different there, you'll say, who are you to critique me? I'm special, I have self-esteem, I just won't hang out with you anymore, I'm gonna find someone else. So you don't take critique well, you don't take criticism well, you don't like discipline. People who forego all those things lead lives that are very unhappy.
Right.
Because discipline, willpower, all these things, you need to go through struggles. You need to set challenges for yourself, because there's no such thing as a perfect utopia. Just how you'll never know when something's hot unless you felt something cold. So the same way that you need to go through a struggle and feel like what it's like to struggle, that when you actually surpass it on your own and you do something, then you get that self-esteem from reaching that struggle. And that sort of self-esteem is really good. So as parents, what I tell people is, instead of just blessing all your kids all the time, well, this is amazing, even though you drew this horrible, like dinosaur that looks like a couch.
Right.
But, so give your kids challenges that are on their level, but that they can surpass. And that will give them their own level of self-esteem that you don't need to give them false praise for.
Right.
So.
Wow, we just covered a lot of bases.
I know. We went total mental health.
Were we supposed to be answering questions?
Yeah, I want to answer questions. Come on.
Wait, am I supposed to get them?
No, you're supposed to just ask me things that have
Oh, okay,
you've
cool.
wondered about health. Like you can ask me anything.
Well, I'm all about